listening to The New Paris. I'm your host, Lindsay Trinita. Next month marks 6 years, if you can believe it, since The New Parisienne was released. I've kept tabs on all the women I profiled, and some have actually become really dear friends. Among them, Ariane Bernard, who at the time of our first interview was overseeing all things digital at Le Parisien newspaper. I distinctly remember the moment I met her at a dinner. I heard her speak with the kind of cultural fluency and humor of someone reared in the United States. And yet, she wasn't. I quickly learned she was perfectly bilingual, but I wanted to know how she accommodated the dualities of her identity, something I have to do quite often. Today, she works for herself and goes between Paris and New York, and she joins me to talk about her sequential bilingual journey, navigating two very different work cultures, and a few of her very funny linguistic grievances when it comes to France. You'll also hear which spots in Paris she returns to time and again. And by the way, if you're enjoying the show, please consider subscribing and leaving a little review wherever you get your podcasts. Ariane, welcome to the show, finally.
Thank you for having me.
I met you, you were just saying, almost 10 years ago?
I know.
It's disturbing, as I
But
said.
we've not aged a day.
No, especially not you. I have so many gray hairs I've got to consider covering up.
None of it is real.
As she points to her head. For people who haven't read The New Parisienne, which is a crime, and don't realize that you are one of them, or who have and don't realize you've moved on from your previous career, which was at the Parisien, right?
Yep.
I want to bring people up to speed. So when I met you, you were, I think, just about to start at Le Parisien, and you had been, or maybe you had like freshly begun the job.
I was in the job.
You were in the job. Okay.
Yeah.
So we met through one of my friends and your former colleagues at the New York Times.
And my friend.
And you're also your friend. This is true, just to clarify.
I feel like if she's listening to this, she needs to know.
She needs to know. But, we're at this dinner and I'm thinking to myself, who is that woman at the end of the table? What is her story? And one of our friends, Jake, or you had just met him, Jake, who had also interned at the New York Times, was like, oh, that's Ariane Bernard. And I was like, that sounds French, that name. But your English was so perfect that I was like, well, she must be a dual national. She must have, a parent that's a native English speaker or something. Anyway, I was fascinated by you, plus what you were doing for work. The fact that I learned in that one evening were between New York and Paris, and I'm assuming you're still doing that. What is your linguistic secret, Ariane?
Aha. Wow. But thank you for the compliment. I always feel like whenever people are like, I'm confused, or their reaction is some shade of like, what I'm hearing is not the story you're saying, that it's actually profoundly a compliment, even if it means that I either have to, depending on basically my mood and, I don't know, the stars in the sky, I'll either give a short version that is almost misleading, but I just can't be bothered, or kind of delve into my life story, which, not everyone really should take that much of an interest in. So, I think the short version, just people are not confused, is that, first of all, I have lived in America for more than half my life at this point.
But part-time, not fully.
No,
right?
And just counting full years. It's more than half my life.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Which again is weird because I'm only, 21? Anyway. But so, at a certain point, it's hard to, and there's like various data points that also, I still have, for instance, my college application essays from when I applied to go to college in the US. And like, truly, there's some stuff in there that I'm like, I know what I meant just because I speak French. And so I can see what I probably intended to say. But, so
there's been progress.
There's been, thankfully, considering the amount of time and exposure that we're talking about, there hasn't been some progress. But the short version is, I don't have American parents. I grew up in Paris. I was born in Paris. My family tree could not be more French. for just going back a billion generation. And I went to a regular French school, not an international school. And so I think the thing that allowed us to be where we are today is my parents were always pretty smart about sort of, I have British cousins who are exactly my age. We spent a lot of time with them in the summer. And my parents were always like, one has to speak English and not,
get by.
Know how to order. Yeah, exactly. Order from the menu, but like actually speak English. My dad actually did study in the US for a while, which we never really talked about, but in fact he did for 2 years. But it wasn't something where I was like, oh, because, he's done this, it's like part of the family tradition. Absolutely not. The main thing was, I did have these British cousins so starting from the age of, I want to say 8, my parents, and I'm going to say my mother as shorthand because it was more her doing, but I mean, they were fully bought into the scheme. The two of them would take me out of school like early June, and then I would go to Britain to hang out with my British cousins and go to their school for like a month. And
you were allowed to do that? The school would just like let you pop in?
No. So the British school was like super relaxed. It was like just like a small country public schools, and they thought it was so delightful to have the French cousin kind of popping in. And I was like, because my British cousins, even though their mom is French, my mom's sister, did not actually grow up speaking French. They learned a lot of French just visiting their grandparents in the south of France and hanging out with their French cousins. But they were not at all raised in like with the two languages, which I think it's very kind of like 80s, right? Like I feel like now you wouldn't do that necessarily, but that's what they did, which was all the better for me and my sister, because as a result, you have kids always figure it out. Like you put kids who don't speak the same language or just know a smattering of words from one language and another, and they figure out how to hang out and they're fine. But so I just remember spending time at my cousin's British school. And I think the way that my mother handled it with my French school by truly like putting them devant le fait accompli, as we say in French, like just to basically say, this is going to be how it is that she would, the way she's told me that story, because obviously at the time I wasn't particularly aware of it, is that she would tell the school, I went to a private school, but you're essentially running a glorified daycare in the month of June, which I'm sure they loved to hear. Just, and I was a strong student, and my mother was like, "There's nothing whatever one thing that you're going to learn in the month of June versus like the extended recess that is the month of June. That's just not as good as Ariane spending time with our cousins in Britain." And we did this incredibly through not every year, I don't think, but through the 7th grade. Like the last year I did this was in the 7th grade.
I was going to say, once you're in high school, it becomes a little trickier. I'm sure June is not quite the recess it was when you were younger. Right.
But they actually did do this all the way through the 7th grade. And so I remember, I think in the 8th grade, my mother kind of being like, I guess we can't do it anymore, but like very reluctantly. And so that's when I started, going to summer camp in the US. And in the span of like one summer, my accent, which was British, turned American. Because this is what happens.
That's how
it
happened.
This is where it started to happen. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot more exposure when you think about it to what American sounds like in daily life. This was like the mid-90s, I guess. But I think also like just teenagers most want to fit in.
Sure.
And so it just turned into this fairly brackish thing. And if I spend enough time with Brits, I won't ever sound British. Like that ship has sailed, but I'll have like little weird blips of Britishisms.
Were you musical at all as a kid? Because I find that people who are good with language acquisition tend to have a musical ear.
I did learn the piano like a lot of kids just because one should play an instrument. I was never any good at it. I can carry a tune. I'm not particularly great at singing, but like, I'm not tone deaf. So I see where you're going with this. I think it has more to do with just, there was enough exposure early enough in not a continuum throughout the year, but in sustained periods where it also was interactive, right? It's not just I was listening to it by like, I don't know, watching the Disney Channel or whatever. It's like it's a language that I was actually using, however badly. And so by the time I started learning it formally, it came very quickly. It never really felt like I was ever discovering anything new, although formally I did learn English. Like it's, of course.
You got the basics.
Yeah. And then I got obsessed with the X-Files. Like I was like just truly like the only thing that interested me in the world. And
I did not know this about you. This is unbelievable.
And in fact, when I want to like tell the story in a cute way, I say like, if I sound like this, it's because of the X-Files. And it's not, it's not true, but it's also not true. So I remember, I had kind of like bought like whatever like books or whatever that existed at the time, which by and large were not translated into French. And then, and my mom said, something like, well, you can buy your stupid books, but as long as they're in English. And I was like, deal. And she opened an account for me at Brentano's on the
I remember that.
We lived nearby.
That great bookstore.
Yeah. And we lived nearby. And from my perspective, I thought this was an amazing arrangement. I could get whatever I wanted. And my mom thought she was being a little bit of a hard ass because like, there was the requirement that these books be in English. But from my perspective, I was like, she doesn't seem to realize that like, that's actually the only way that I can like, at a certain point, this was pre-Amazon too. So like the books were like ridiculously expensive imports. Like the whole thing was madness. And when I exhausted all available things that one could possibly acquire, I discovered that the internet also had a lot of X-Files things. And I started to want to have the internet at home and have my own computer. It's funny because now, one
Your
thing
career
leads to another. And now I also, I don't put together PCs anymore, but there is a lot of that stuff that like becomes kind of like your own sort of like where you start from in terms of motivation and where that takes you is not necessarily the journey you might predict.
No, but you can see the source of some of this.
Yes.
Where your career went, where the English has allowed you to go and carried you. So if we jump ahead, you obviously, so the spoiler is she goes to university in America. She ends up working at the New York Times for 14 years, right?
Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah. If I remember correctly, in business, right? Like managing the website, right?
So, no, my first job at the New York Times, I was a wee child. I was hired freshly out of school, was in the newsroom.
Oh, you were in the newsroom. That's right. Okay.
Yeah. And I was in the Paris bureau for 4.5 years, something like that. And then I ended up moving to New York with a job at the website. But those jobs were technically in the newsroom. The job in Paris was definitely an editorial job. And then in New York, it was kind of like that era of the website that had, where like the website was like doubling in size every day.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I was qualified at any point for any of the jobs that I held, but demand was such that, if you had fingers to type with, they were like, this is fine.
Come on down. Wow.
This is fine. And so then I moved to New York, and the jobs in New York, like my first few jobs, I was a homepage producer, which is arguably one of the best jobs in journalism. But it's weirdly, at the time, was like technical, but also editorial. It's a very different job nowadays, but
because it's about prioritizing where the content goes and where how it's published and where it lives.
Yeah. There was a lot of that. It's nowadays again like quite different, just because there's so much automation and also like the tools that you use in order to publish a site like the New York Times has, as you might imagine, changed quite a bit. In my era, and one thing leads to another, the Times decided that it would build its own sort of large-scale tools for publishing its website. Prior to, like when I first started, we were still using off-the-shelf, highly customized and hacked on off-the-shelf solutions. But by like 2009, 2010, the Times felt it had come to, the end of that road, which it probably had come to the end of that road, I would argue, in 2006. But and that they would, at very high cost, because those are not easy things to build, but build their own tools, and those tools are called CMSs, content management systems. There's lots of
Right.
other sort of platform-oriented tools to manage the various bits and pieces. And so the sort of stakeholder of those tools that can represent the interests of, different user types that will touch and use these tools. One of the larger interest groups to a CMS is, of course, the content creators, the journalists, the editors. And so they recruited heavily from the homepages at the time because we had been the group that had straddled the most the technical capability, but also editorial intent of publishing NewYorkTimes.com. That's how I progressively moved to a much more technical role and eventually kind of fully into the business side of things. But not even at the New York Times, it was at Taboola that I fully moved into.
Right. Your following job, and then as the head of digital, right, at Le Parisien.
No, the following job I had was being the product lead for a brand new product group at Taboola, which is an ad tech company headquartered in New York. And we were building these large scale data analysis and, predict like a lot of predictive audience tools for the newsrooms of Taboola publishers. It was an amazing job. I would have totally stayed. My team was amazing. But then, LVMH, Le Parisien made me an offer I felt I couldn't refuse. And so I ended up taking that job. But I'll always regret
Paris.
I'll always regret Taboola for what it was. It was amazing.
So you come back to Paris, you work at Le Parisien, and now I'm really wondering, so you're truly bicultural. You are truly like a pure product of these two places. You speak two languages perfectly. Our stories sort of mirror one another, although I would say that you started really immersing yourself or getting exposed to English much earlier than I did. I didn't start learning French until I was 12. So you had a big head start. And certainly I was not digging into the X-Files French version. But I'm wondering how, because I know how it impacted me, how this truly dual identity then, how that was helpful in your career journey and your personal life, and how it may have actually made things perhaps a bit more complicated. Because as no one knows what we were talking about off recording, but one of the things you mentioned, which I thought was so fascinating that I hadn't heard anyone say in this way, is late in life bilinguals, right? Or later in life bilinguals versus those who are born with the dual national or dual language parents and who are reared with those two really from birth. How does this complicate your identity? How does it help?
Yeah, it's funny, right? Because I think it's probably the same for you, although I don't want to put words in your mouth. There is a way in which the fluency with the language helps, not just in a kind of like straightforward manner, like you understand more things just because your language is better, but also because it helps you fit in to such a degree that then that, sort of number two language, number two country takes you in as one of its own. And I know that for me in America, I hasten to say, also because I'm white, also because I'm a Westerner, also because I'm Christian, like all those things are probably 97% of why America was like, this is one of ours, this is one of our babies. But I could have been the same with a different skin tone, and my story might actually have felt very different. But I do recognize that the way in which language has a way to kind of like make not just your journey, the way you get into the room more comfortable, but your stay into the room more comfortable, and it makes people more comfortable with you, which then in turns kind of like it's a compounding interest. And I'm curious. I don't know whether you feel that way because your French is so spectacular, which by the way is
does help.
Ton harder.
Well, I don't know. There are moments where, and I don't know if you still feel this, but there are sometimes where I'm facing someone or I'm conversing with someone who is, for whatever reason, whether it's real or just in my imagination, is destabilizing or intimidating, or I I perceive them to be judging me as I'm speaking, and then the mistakes will come back out, and then the sort of choppy thoughts are harder to work through. But for the most part, yeah, I mean, I credit the moment, the like almost 4 years I worked in advertising with all French colleagues for the most part, and hearing the most god awful jokes. Most of them would get people in trouble today. You know, being surrounded by just the casual chit chat and slang and all of the things that like the one person I live with who's French might not use himself. I mean, that just like
Are you talking about
expanded
your
my
cats?
yeah, their vocabulary is really limited. But expanding my linguistic horizons like radically. And so that I think is why I can sometimes feel quite comfortable in in these
Yeah.
situations now, and why interviewing in French is like not an issue. And that means I can get closer, I think,
Yeah.
to my subject and to the material. But I still feel now that I am less, I don't know, sometimes less American maybe, and because of this jumbled nature. But it's also because I haven't split time like you have, right? You've continued to work for often American companies or consult for American companies. And yes, I work for them as a freelancer,
Yeah.
but my entire life is here. And so I think where we diverge is in that experience of sharing space with two different places, and then what that does to your sense of self.
Yeah. I think one difference also is like I never get overwhelmed by the English. If anything, at this point I get overwhelmed by the French, and not the understanding of it. It's my first language. I
Yeah.
never get confused, but I do get confused about how to say certain things, particularly in my professional life, because I very rarely work in French. I've only ever worked in French for 2 years, and that was 17 years into my career, which was working for Le Parisien. That was it. It was the first time I ever had teams who were French, which, was a journey for all of us.
Well, that's what I'm wondering also. Did you have trouble like connecting with them? Because actually you bring something so much more, I don't want to say layered because that's very disparaging of them, but you bring this other skill set and this other way of seeing the world to the table.
So I don't even think of it necessarily as being like, oh, I have a thing you don't have. It was much more like, how do I fit my square peg in this round hole type of thing. And at times I felt fairly self-confident that my square peg ways were better than the round holes. But at times also it was far more neutral, more like there are more of you as your manager. Because so at Le Parisien, I was leading the entire digital business. But as a manager, you're supposed to help them. Like I don't actually achieve that much value for the organization. I'm supposed to drive this ship, but the actual sort of effort and the actual production of things mostly does not rest on me. So if I can't get sort of alignment and convey and drive people to kind of see things the way I do, or get to see things the way they do, and kind of agree that we're going to do it the way that maybe they've been doing this for a reason. It is a complicated situation. But so by and large, and it's only something that like when I joined Le Parisien, I almost like within, I feel like a couple of weeks, I had a very, very clear sense of how as a professional, I was only American. I had no frame of reference for France. And it was probably made even worse by the fact that I didn't even go to school in France. Like moved when I was 18. It's not like I like studied with, I mean, I went to high school in France, but that was a while ago, and it's a very different, it is culturally relevant, but it's not professionally relevant. Like I
I
don't think
see.
there's anything that you bring with you all the way from high school when you're
No.
37 and
Right.
you have a team of, dozens of French people, however many, or 40 or whatever, however many
So
there
did you
were.
feel sort of like an outsider in your home country?
I felt very out of place, and I felt very misunderstood and very uncomfortable. And one thing that I realized, and it's going to work really well with like our topic of, what does language, like how does language play a part into all this, is I had a very clear realization at that point that having an accent was an amazing, useful thing, because my problem was that I didn't have one when I spoke French. If I had had an accent, which obviously would have been absurd, but an accent in a way continuously, I'm going to speak like an engineer, but it continuously encodes something in what you're saying, which is, I'm not from here. I'm not from here. I'm not from here. And the people that do have an accent will go to obviously a high amount of work to try and lose it, either because they'll go to high length in order to lose it, either because they want to be better understood or they want for people around them to be more comfortable with them. But I hasten to tell you, having an accent serves a social purpose. And I had never, of course, thought of that because I have not had an accent in English in a long time. And obviously I'm never going to have an accent speaking French. But because I didn't have an accent speaking French to these French teams, the way in which I felt adrift or just not fully aligned or not fully comprehending of what I had to work with and the way that I was supposed to work with them was completely invisible to them. And I was like, damn, it would be helpful if I all of a sudden, could materialize my foreignness with an accent.
Yeah, these scenarios are so hard, and I don't think people realize that this is the result of being a later in life learner, right? Or not being a native who can so seamlessly turn on one button.
No, I don't think this part was it was not a language issue primarily. It was my way of knowing how to be a professional was American, because that was all I had ever done. I only had worked with American companies, with American colleagues. You said, you have lived in France for a very long time now, but I would argue that you use a lot more English in your day-to-day life because of who you work with. I, in the US, could go months without speaking French. I mean, no, I'd speak French to my mom on the phone, but otherwise never used French for anything. So it's in college, like I didn't use any French, like I just did not use French. It wasn't a language issue. It was much more like how to be a colleague to people, how to be their manager, how to think of how do we express goals, how do we frame risk, how do we, set, targets that are a little bit uncomfortable, but we feel safe trying it, even if we're not sure whether we'll make it. All those things are incredibly culturally colored. And I knew enough about France because of, being French, that I knew it was different in the US, but I did not know how to instantly sort of backfill the equivalent experience of my years into what I thought would be the French version of that, now that I had a French team to manage. And I feel like there were so many, I think they actually were happy with me. This was, I decided to leave for reasons that, I don't think that like the way in which this was hard for me was known to them at all. Or maybe some of them, but not at all to the depth of how hard this was. And funny enough, I feel like if I was trying this today, I actually would do a lot better with it, because I would recognize that I just need to ask. I didn't realize how much I just could not kind of like fake hydrate a hypothetical sort of French version of being a manager just from wanting it.
Right. So you've moved on now. You work for yourself, as you have for a number of years. You are an entrepreneur. You build things. But you're still going between New York and Paris. And I'm sure that means when you're going about certain normal things like booking train tickets or walking around Paris and seeing signs and, realizing that linguistically there are some things that don't quite work. And because you also have this like perfect understanding of both languages, you see where sometimes things get lost in translation or completely botched. And I'm wondering, as per our very comedic text message exchange, if you have any grievances, some language grievances. What are they?
Here's the thing. I propose a 2-person jury, no attempts of justice. And while I'm against the death penalty, I think we can make an exception. I have a number of, parties that have caused injury, and I wish to bring them to this fine podcast. It's funny, right? Because, and I send those things to you because I know that you'll get it. And there's another person that I send this to, who's my BFF, who lives in London, who's lived in London for as long as I've lived in the US, probably even longer, and who's equally just, rubbed in the wrong way by some of these things. It is a very peculiar injury. And I don't do well with it. I can't. I think the thing there's this thing in French in websites, there's a thing called a call to action, which is, for instance, like subscribe. And the call to action that you often will find on a French website is framed as an action driven in the first person. I subscribe, which, the English, which, first of all, even in French, it drives me insane. Like, I'm like, what is this? Are we talking to a kid? Like the way that I'm going to tell my 3-year-old niece, like, we're putting on our shoes now, rather than being like, put on your shoes, which is, the norm. It's like, let's. And so those French CTAs, like, je m'abonne. Like, I'm already about to like toss out my computer out the window and being like, and by the way, for this crime, I shall never subscribe. Congratulations. This is how I'm going to reward you. But then because my computer is in English, and so some websites will sort of default you into their English version if they have one, and the horrors that one sees. And so first on the docket, le site de la SNCF. SNCF is the French railroad operator. And these awful, I discover, je découvre. I mean, really, we should both bring our worst to this spot, because the SNCF has had an English language websites for a very long time. It's not a question of, is it AI? Because way before they were translating their websites with AI, these crimes were being committed. So they were being committed by humans, and they are on trial today. Because I totally get it. Like I build certain like platforms that are right now being translated automatically with AI, and I take the stance of like, I'm building them on my own. I don't have the kind of budget or attention to translate them manually. AI is imperfect, although getting better in a number of languages. But mostly I can justify it to myself and to my end users by saying it's kind of this or nothing. However, the SNCF has a gazillion people. I'm sure they can spare a native English speaker to go over the main pages of their website so that they don't have call to actions that say, I discover as an action.
Right. So the action is like you're clicking on a journey or something, right? Or an offer. And in French, it would say je découvre, which is already, eye-rolly. And then they just simply translate it to I discover, which no one would say. No call to action in English would use that. They would just say, discover now, or explore now, or click here, read more.
Click here, read more. Any of those things. Come on. And I don't just say this because I literally build platforms for a living, but The level of, it's either we do not care,
Mm.
not amazing, or we think that surely the way that we think about things in French is the way that other languages also kind of, you know, idiomatically will phrase things, which leads me to, on trial, on trial next are the the French companies who go through, who have this idea of like, oh, we're gonna find a name for ourselves that's going to sound English-ish. And
Mm-hmm.
then the spelling that they choose, like often, right, you will encounter those smaller companies in writing first. Like you'll see their website name or their logo, whatever. And it's going to be anything where, for instance, the French think of this ee, right, of English as being the same as their e, their I sound, which it's not,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like as we all know. Um, so they'll think, oh, if I can just take this word that sounds like it has this e sound, and I will transform it with like the two double e's, and then it's gonna sound the same in English. And it's like, that's no, no, it doesn't. So there's this company and that does glasses called Easy Peasy,
Yep.
and they're spelled I think IZIPIZ, either Y or I.
I. Mm-hmm.
And
Right, but
actually do like
for
their
an English
product, but
speaker, but for an English speaker, you would want to say, is it pizzy?
I'm
Is
not
it?
sure. But it's not what they think it is.
Right, right, right.
And it's only if you spend enough time, if you for whatever reason end up mouthing it in the original French, that then you discover what they were trying to do. Because there's some companies where I feel like, of course, none of them like come to my mind, but like where I discovered like much later what they were trying to do. And I was like, oh my God. So like easy machin,
Mm.
IZI. And it's like, that's if you think you can go to market in America with that name and be pronounced in the way that you think you should be pronounced, I've got some bad news.
Well, and I know this is a different crime, but it's one that I really struggle with. The use of English words in service of, I guess, appearing cool, or global, but they don't really check again with, enough of a test group of native English speakers.
Just
So
just one person would often save them.
one person, yeah, but like maybe a couple would be ideal. It's a chain of stores now that has done very well for itself. It's called Oh My Cream. What? What is this? So it's a
What?
skincare and like cosmetics multi-brand store, clean beauty, like the number of other ideas one could have chosen, right? And I just totally struggle with this. It also doesn't feel particularly high end, and the products are pretty, mid-range to high end. I don't know what's going on.
There's so many there, I mean, I think in general, and I'm very willing to kind of like forgive the crimes of like a young company to kind of have gone away, that anybody else looks at it and you're like, but why did you do this though? Did you at any point? The the problem is you are literally staking your brand identity. In some ways, the I Discover CTAs of the SNCF website, they're unacceptable because of the size of the SNCF, but they are just a dumb CTA. They can fix that tomorrow if they want to. But if you're gonna go with like your brand name, it's like, come on, just that one time, just find any American tourist, tell them, here's $50 and a croissant. Can you or can you not tell me how you feel about this brand name, or how do you even read this word?
Yeah,
I'm sure we can spare
it's
that
shocking.
budget.
It's truly shocking. I
It's
don't want to
shocking.
end on a grievance, though. I actually want to know
Do
when
you
you're
not?
here in. I don't. No, I'm trying to be more uplifting and positive, Ariane. Uh, in the book, you told me that, what your affection was for the Parc Monceau,
Mm.
in the 17th arrondissement. But where else, if you were to name 3 places you love in Paris and you go whenever you're spending a stint here, and you're here right now, because I recognize your bookshelf, where do you go? What is a very Ariane Paris experience?
It's funny because I think you always treat differently the place that is your home. And now I realize I treat New York the same way. Like there's not like a place that like I rush to go to in New York. Like there's a certain assumption of like it'll always be there.
Hmm.
We'll get to it when we get to it. But there are places in Paris that I feel like every single time that I even like just casually happen to kind of be by or go in, and I'm like every time I'm like, oh my God, this is so lovely. And one of those places, which is kind of such a weird niche thing. So there's this door on on the Rue de Seine, as you get behind the Institut, which is arguably one of the most beautiful monuments in Paris. And so you're on the Rue de Seine. I feel like it's Rue de Seine and Rue Mazarine,
Hmm.
but don't quote me on it. Somebody use Google Map. And when you're on the back of it, for whatever reason, it does not look like anything, right? It's a small, winding street, and there is this kind of large double door. And that double door is mostly open. I mean, maybe it never even closes. And if you go into it, you assume you're just kind of going into another street, and you actually find yourself into the courtyard of the Institut, which is itself just on the quay, on the Seine. So all of a sudden you're surrounded by this. The Institut is like a half moon shape
Yep.
or half circle shaped building. You're in this beautiful sort of classic 17th century courtyard. I hope it's 17th century. I think it
It's
is,
old.
but
We'll verify.
1, 2, 3, old. Yes, but as a French person, I feel like one should be precise. It's in America, anything over 100 years is classified as old, but I can be a little bit more precise. But so you're in this just beautiful, incredibly special courtyard, but you come into it almost what I think almost is like a surprise, and the sort of the way that you enter, it's almost like a movie set type of thing. You're on the other side of that movie set, and it's just kind of boards and like a fake city, right? And then you step into it, and it looks like it's Paris. But
Yeah, it's more
and not
like a
just
passageway. It's like I don't
yeah.
even realize they're doors.
I'm trying to think. Like I feel like maybe they're not even doors. It feels like it's a door, but you're right. It might be
I
more
think
of
it might just be an arch,
it might just be an arch. You might be
but it is that
you're probably
wonderful
right.
wow feeling when you
Yeah.
turn into it and there you are.
Yeah. And it's I really think of it as like that movie set thing where like the back of it is nothing because it's not painted, and it's just, large boards of wood. And then you see it on the other side, and it's like made to look like the streets of New York.
Mm.
And there's that surprise of it. It's like, oh, this is wow, okay. This is what we're doing now. And I just love this. And there's like an equivalent of this, which I always recommend to my American friends, any of my non-Parisian friends, which is if you come into, and it actually is right now the time because we're in the summer, the courtyard. So the Le Louvre has several sort of closed courtyards.
Yeah.
One of them has been covered with a roof a number of years ago and is now part of the museum itself. But one of them is still a proper courtyard, and it has a name. And of course now, La Cour Napoléon. Is it Cour Napoléon?
Well,
Well,
let's see.
again, somebody will have to do their research. And so you come into it through, it's actually just directly across from the Institut. You cross over in that little bridge, and you can come in. And this closes pretty much at sunset. So in the summer, it closes like at 10 or 11. And I highly recommend going when it is sunset, because so you come into the courtyard, there's nothing in that courtyard. It's not, and from there you can lead into the other side of the Louvre, which has the pyramid. And so you cross, and it kind of, you have this like chiaroscuro effects, because all this, the light, obviously when you're in a passageway, there's a lot less light, and you exit, And you get this perspective on the pyramid that you don't usually get, because most people see the pyramid sort of from the Tuileries with the backdrop of the
Right.
Louvre behind it. But in this case, you're coming from the other side. So you see the pyramid and then beyond it, the garden. And with this sort of like coming from dark into light, and particularly at dusk, it creates this, the light just cannot be beaten.
You're right. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, I happen to like the pyramids. I know that some people don't like it, feels like it's out of place. I think that there's an argument, but I like it. So, and it is a very kind of special way of getting to see it if you go through this particular sort of path rather than seeing it from the path that most people see it.
Yeah, I think there are, I don't know if it's the cour carré, which is the courtyard behind, but it's not, that one's not covered. However, there's a moment where you do have to pass through an arch of some sort, and that's where it's darkened for a little bit, and then you come out and you see the light.
Yeah.
And you have one of those, I mean, it's far more heavily trafficked, but from Rivoli, you know, you go under the archways, and those close at night at a certain point, like you said. But it's just, yeah, the way the light hits is always special. Is there anywhere you go to eat that you're just like, this is my forever fave?
I don't think I have a forever fave, but I do know that I whenever it is on offer somewhere in New York, I'm always like, no, I won't have this. I can only have this in Paris. And it's not just croissant, even though that too, but but it is a steak tartare. And I feel like when I've been away long enough from, it's not a thing I want to eat all the time, you know, but I think of it as being a dish that is only acceptable when in Rome. And that's, I'm sure, very unfair to what I no doubt are great steak tartares that I'm sure you can have in New York. But I'm fairly equal opportunity in terms of, you know, there's a few places that I'm very happy to get it from, and particularly like the more kind of like brasserie-ish. Like I feel like this is where this dish needs to live. I'm highly suspicious of a tartare that like lives in some sort of like, you know, new fangled restaurant that might be super interesting and have a great chef and, you know, do a lot of interesting dishes. But to me, there is kind of a like a correct place and a correct vibe for ordering it. And I wouldn't even like consider it. Like I would see it and I would say, well, great, that's not what I want from this place. So there's a great one at Le Sévéro, which is not a place I go to that often.
Oh, that one is iconic.
It is iconic. But it's not close, iconic. So it's like I don't seek it out, but you know, it's more about the dish and the sort of way in which the dish is of the place.
Right.
What about you? Is there, like, when you come back?
Usually I'm just overjoyed to pay less for most things, if we're being honest.
Yeah.
But no, the bread. I mean, first and foremost, bread. You really can't beat the quality and the price and the value here. So I'll probably say bread and cheese, unpasteurized cheese.
Wait, can I complain about the things that are sold as bagels in Paris?
That's a different crime against humanity.
It really is. And the fact
that'll be for part two.
Fine. I'll come, you know, I'll come back full of fury for this.
We need to just start compiling a list and then revisit.
More than willing.
Ariane, I think you're an amazing example of what happens when you are persistent, when you're exposed to other languages and cultures at a young age, and where life can take you when you have languages to draw upon. No plan, but doesn't matter. You ended up just fine.
Well, thank you. That's very kind.
I think the lesson here is exposure is key if you didn't happen to be born into a household where multiple languages are spoken, and there is a way. Ariane, I hope you'll come back.
The two of us can tell you there's a way.
There is a way, and I hope you'll come back and we'll do a whole episode just on grievances. But until then, I wish you luck in your continued dual culture journey. That's the show for today. If you're listening on Spotify, be sure to check out the poll related to this episode by scrolling down in your app. There are more exciting conversations to come this season, so I hope you'll subscribe or share the show with a friend if you've been enjoying what you've heard so far. As always, you can find more from me at lindsaytrimuta.com and at the New Paris Dispatch on Substack. À très bientôt!